Welcome into Now We're Talking. I want to welcome in Michael Thurmond, recently served 2 terms as elected CEO of DeKalb County, an Atlanta suburb that had $150 million in the bank when he left the office. Before that, you were credited with stabilizing the DeKalb County school system as interim superintendent after its accreditation agency threatened to strip its seal of approval, citing financial mismanagement, the school board dysfunction, and nepotism. You also oversaw welfare reform as director of Georgia's Division of Family and Child Services in the mid-1990s after you gave up your state house seat to make an unsuccessful run for Congress in 1992. You are an attorney, and you have written multiple books on Georgia's history. Now, there's more to your story, as I found out, and I briefly want you to tell me why a city boy like you would make a good governor for a rural community like ours. Well, we like hearing things like that because sometimes I think that the citizens out here and the citizens in South Georgia, the citizens throughout the rural community, don't always feel like they connect with people from the city. And I think that sometimes when people go around and campaign, they campaign from the city lights. So it's good to hear a little bit about your background. I do have things that are very important, not only from people who are in the urban areas, but also from the rural communities. And one of the number one things that I think all people are concerned about is the cost of living and the economy throughout Georgia. Voters consistently say that the cost of living is that their top concern. What specific policies would you support to address the rising costs for housing, health care, and groceries?
We're in the midst of an affordability crisis in this state and across this nation. On day one of the Thurmond administration, I'm going to declare an affordability crisis in the state of Georgia and direct all of my department heads, all state resources, to begin to focus on how we can reduce the cost of living for hardworking men and women across our state. Number one, I'm going to begin to work to cut the sales tax. As you know, the sales tax is more or less affixed to just about anything we buy, absent drugs and over-the-counter foods. But that is having a very damaging impact on the cost of living, on people being able to afford it. So what we're going to do is cut it in half so that we can help life to become more affordable for Georgia citizens. Second, for working families, particularly those with small children, Georgia has an initiative called the CAPS program that provides scholarships for young working parents. Childcare is one of the most expensive items that must be purchased on a monthly basis for young parents. Georgia provides a scholarship for children of working parents. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, we cut those scholarships by 20,000 positions. I'm going to restore those positions. And by the way, I'm proud of that because as the DFACS director, I created Childcare for the Working Poor initiative. I'm going to pour back into that. When you think about childcare, roughly $1,000 a month on average. If a parent gets a scholarship, that's like adding $1,000 back to a salary and the bottom line in the family. The second thing I hear a lot about, people complain about skyrocketing automobile insurance premiums.
That was my next question to ask you about.
Okay, thank you for asking that question because I hear it a lot. People are upset by premiums that are simply going through the roof. One of the things that's driving the sharp increase in automobile premiums is not driving records. Insurance companies often use credit scores to determine insurance premiums. So you can have a perfect driving record, but if you have a low credit score, say you had a hospitalization and falling behind on your bills, that will impact or result in increased premiums on your automobile. There are 8 states that prohibit insurance companies from using credit scores to set automobile premiums. As your next governor, I'm going to work to make sure that Georgia is the 9th state that will prohibit insurance companies from using that to increase automobile premiums. There's no real correlation between a credit score and a safe driving record.
And my understanding that there's other factors in that as well. It depends on if you go straight to the agent or if you buy it online, that raises or lowers your cost as well.
It can impact it as well. But at the end of the day, you're including credit scores. Whatever the rate is going to be higher. And I just don't see the correlation between credit scores and safe driving records.
Well, I know that it is a huge concern of a lot of people. People who move into our state are complaining about it. They say that they moved to Georgia and their insurance rates are one of the things that impact their wallet more than anything else.
Absolutely. And one other thing, to encourage more first-time home buyers, I'm going to increase my investment in the DREAM program that's being administered by the Department of Community Affairs. The DREAM program help to provide funding for mortgages for first-time buyers up to $10,000 or 5%, whichever is lower. So I'm going to increase state investment in the DREAM program so we can increase the number of first-time home buyers. Many young first-time buyers have really been priced out the market. And it's not just young either. Middle-aged people are not able to purchase homes. Purchasing a home is a major part of securing the American dream. So we have to help hardworking Georgians who want to purchase homes to do so.
Absolutely. I know that here in Northeast Georgia, the market is so outrageous that there's a lot of people that not only can't afford to buy a home, but they can't even afford to rent an apartment. And we're talking about, where a 1 and 2 bedroom apartment is, $1,500, $1,600, $1,800 a month, and a person that's making minimum wage cannot afford a place to live.
Oh, absolutely. And, the good thing is North Georgia is such an attractive part of our state. It's beautiful and the quality of life is high. The downside is costs associated with living here, and we have to continue to do that. Another initiative I'm going to expand as CEO of DeKalb County, we had a emergency rental assistance program. Sometimes people get sick, they have an accident, they lose a job, they can't afford the $1,500 a month. Suddenly they're facing eviction on the street. We need to be able to support people through short periods of time with emergency rental assistance. We distributed $55 million to 5,000 families in DeKalb during the pandemic. We will spread that initiative statewide so that men and women who fall on hard times, unavoidable, will at least have a bridge that will help them until they can get back on their feet again.
Okay, that brings me to ask you about removing property taxes. I know that there is a big initiative right now for the state of Georgia, or at least in this area. Okay, and I don't know if you're familiar with that, but removing property taxes as well as repealing income taxes from Georgia citizens. How do you feel about that?
Well, there were 2 separate bills that was introduced and debated in the Georgia General Assembly this year. 2 passed, but they were not necessarily the bills that were introduced. The income tax bill originally was proposed to eliminate the state income tax. That's not going to happen. It was irresponsible and had no real chance of success. What did happen was it will continue to gradually reduce the tax rates over the next several years, depending on the economy, whether or not we're growing or retracting. But that's not eliminating the state income tax. And the property tax measure that was passed was actually based on a strategy that I created and implemented in DeKalb County. So what was actually passed would give local jurisdictions, primarily counties, the opportunity to adopt a referendum that will create a 1% sales tax that will be used as a credit against the ad valorem tax liability of homeowners in a particular jurisdiction. I did that in DeKalb in 2018, and we passed 2 referendums. Well, that was 1 penny dedicated to property tax relief, and we have generated and will continue to generate over the next 10 years $1.5 billion in property tax relief for DeKalb homeowners. That strategy was adopted first by the House, then by the Senate, and is now part of the state strategy, which I support. And the good news about the strategy that we implemented is a credit that accrues to a homeowner, and it does not take away revenue from local government.
Okay. And going right along with economy, I'm going to skip down a little bit and ask you about bringing jobs to the state of Georgia, not just to the rural areas, but throughout the state of Georgia, because it's very important. We have in Northeast Georgia a lot of projects like the Inland Port in Hall County. That's an ongoing development, as well as a lot of debates about what needs to be brought to Northeast Georgia. But as governor of the state, what will you do to bring more industry and job opportunities to the state? And I'm talking about long-term sustainability, jobs.
But Georgia, for the last 12 years, has celebrated the fact that we have been ranked number 1 among all the states as a prime location for business relocation. I'm going to continue to do everything I can to protect that number 1 ranking. But what we're also seeing in Georgia is a decline in per capita income, particularly in rural Georgia. So we have to attract industries that will create good jobs so that men and women who fill those jobs will have salaries that can support themselves and their families. As a former labor commissioner, I went on multiple economic development trips on behalf of the state of Georgia. And I'm proud of the fact that as labor commissioner, I helped over 300,000 Georgians find jobs, if not new careers. I'm going to continue to do that. We must have and build and educate and train the most proficient workforce on the planet. In order to do that, we have to reimagine and invest in our public and private schools, particularly public. We must have an education system that creates multiple pathways to success. If you decide to go to Piedmont College or Georgia Tech or UGA or Spelman or Morehouse or any of the other 4-year institutions in Savannah State, that's great. But we have to also acknowledge and recognize that it's just as significant and important for our children to enroll in the local technical college, North Georgia Tech, as it is to go to Georgia Tech. We are now in an economy that is dominated by skills, more so than even degrees. And so a young person who can create the right skill set will better position themselves to take advantage of new industries coming in. If we are going to invest tens of millions of dollars in incentives, investments in infrastructure, tax incentives to get businesses to locate to Georgia, one of the expectations will be is that qualified Georgians will be first in line to fill those.
Well, it's good to hear that you are a proponent of the technical schools, because I've been doing a little bit of research and finding that there's a lot of jobs that are not going to be existing in the next 10 years, and they are going to go to more skilled labor jobs. Also, we know that even though Georgia does rank number one in the job market and industries coming here, we also see a lot of plant closings as well. So how do we balance that out? Even though we gain more industries, we're also losing some industries.
Yes, some economists call it creative destruction. As the former labor commissioner during the Great Recession, I spent most of my time here in North Georgia when the textile industries and manufacturing were just devastated by NAFTA and the free trade agreement, with so many jobs moved overseas. And I still recall the times I had to go into plants after the announcement had been made and see the disappointment in the eyes of the men and women who have been working there for generations, if not years, and also the sense of betrayal that America basically took jobs and careers and ways of life from them. So we have to be sensitive to that, invest in our training initiatives, and make sure that people who may lose their job will have an opportunity to access other training and educational opportunities. One thing we're going to have to do, I spoke about it briefly earlier, is that we must ensure that Georgia's workforce is the most AI proficient workforce on the planet. AI is here, is not going away. And so what I will do is create a tuition-free certificate program at our technical colleges and select it to associate and university level schools in this state, so that any Georgian, regardless of age or educational attainment, he or she chooses, will be able to get a certificate in AI, so that we will at least have a baseline understanding of this technology. Look, unless we are proactive and take immediate steps to protect our workforce and our population, to upskill them and prepare them for the next iteration of the evolution of technology in our society, one thing we can't afford to be are victims of this technology. We must tame it and leverage it for our advantage.
Tuition free sounds great, but somebody's got to pay the bill. So where does that money come from?
Well, Georgia is not a poor state. Georgia has an $18 billion surplus. And we just, this past legislative session, provided over $1.2 billion in additional tax cuts. Our budget has been growing by 3 to 4% each year for the last over a decade. So we're not a poor state. So what we have to do, though, is prioritize investing in people. Must be a government that's of, by, and for people. So, and if you upskill and improve a potential worker, that worker will create more economic investment, and we can grow the economy. One of the key things to business growth is to have a skilled, trained, educated workforce. And a skilled, trained worker is a better educated worker, and a better trained worker is a more productive worker. And a more productive worker will generate more profit, and more profits will lead to more dividends for business owners and investors.
I want to go back to talking about the economy on a different level. Part of that is healthcare. There's so many people out here who cannot afford healthcare. You talk about us being, a very fluid state, that we have money, and yet we have so many people out there that cannot afford healthcare. How do we combat that? How do we make healthcare affordable for people here in Georgia?
Well, of course, the healthcare affordability crisis is a national, but even worse here in Georgia, because Georgia, unlike was one of 10 states that refused to expand Medicaid several years ago, and consequently, we've left more than $10 billion on the table in Washington. Just this, over the last 45 days, an additional 500,000 Georgians lost their health care because the Trump administration and our leaders in Washington refused to extend the Affordable Care Health Credit. So in Georgia today, there are 500,000 additional uninsured Georgians, over 1 million. So what I will do, day one, is to recognize that the healthcare crisis is not a partisan issue. It's really not. It has nothing to do with geography. We can't be a great state if we have some 10% of our people uninsured. And look, people are still going to show up at the hospital. It's just that taxpayers are paying the bill. We can do better. I will reform Medicaid from the inside out, not the outside in. There are savings that can be generated as the way it's being administered. There's a path, new regulations are coming down in 2027, where there will be work requirements or work readiness requirements. Right now, Georgia spent over $100 million implementing the Pathways program. What I will do is utilize the Georgia Department of Labor to implement that. And I believe we can save 90% of that $100 million. That's a $90 million savings that can be invested in extending health care.
And how do you cut the red tape for the average Georgian?
Well, I've had the advantage of experience in doing it. As the DFACS director, Governor Zell Miller hired me to implement welfare reform in Georgia. At the time, we had over 100,000 families on public assistance. We had to totally revamp, re-envision the public assistance, what was known as welfare, to the TANF program. As a result of our initiatives, we helped 90,000 Georgians move from welfare to work. As the labor commissioner, we had an antiquated system of unemployment offices, created a statewide network of state-of-the-art career centers that helped over 300,000 Georgians find jobs. It's the vision. It's putting people first and not bureaucracies. It's recognizing that only if we understand the needs of the people, prioritize the needs of the people, not of government bureaucrats and bureaucracies, there are so many things we can get done. I know for a fact, we can expand Medicaid with the money that we have. It's just that it's being spent, but not being spent in a way that expands medical coverage to more Georgians.
One of the biggest problems I hear and see around here for families who do not have medical insurance or don't have enough medical insurance is if they are diagnosed or a family member is diagnosed with a catastrophic disease and it just about breaks the bank for them. How do they go about, or will you implement programs that they can go about getting emergency medical care to take care of, let's say, a child who is diagnosed with cancer and needs care immediately?
Well, it'll be a collaborative effort. The biggest challenge, along with those who contract catastrophic injuries, if you're not insured, then you delay seeing a doctor. And many diseases are actually treatable, if not preventable. But if you don't have insurance, you avoid going to the hospital or seeing a doctor. But eventually, you become so sick or ill, you're forced to go. But when you finally go, the cost to treat is astronomically higher. So having a comprehensive health insurance program system will help those who can and do have preventable diseases, which will allow us to invest more in trying to treat and frankly cure some of the more catastrophic diseases. We're spending the money. It's just that we need to spend it further upstream, being proactive as opposed to reactive.
Exactly. How long do you think, if you're governor, it would take you to implement these programs? Would it be something that could be done almost immediately? Would you start working on programs immediately to do this? Or will it take years? Would you be able to even implement these in a first term, or would it take a second term?
Well, no, it's with any public strategy.
Hard question.
No, yeah, it is, but it's really the thing I've come to understand during my career. You don't solve anything in government. It's not solving it. What you really want to do is capture the trend line. You want the bad things trending down and the good things trending up. I think it's a mistake to try to solve it in 4 years or 8 years. But what I will do, and it's a commitment I will make, is that as governor, we will have fewer people that are uninsured and more people living healthier. So we can capture the trend line even if we don't solve completely the problem.
Okay, let's talk about the education system. What do you think is the biggest problems with Georgia's education system, and what would you say would be a solution to that?
Thank you for that question. When I'm elected governor, I'll be the first former school superintendent to serve as governor of Georgia. I was the school superintendent of the DeKalb County School District. We had 100,000 students, 13,000 employees, 24 or 5 high schools. Number one, we have to learn how to listen to the men and women who are on the front line. One of the biggest challenges we have, and no offense, is that we have elected officials who think, for whatever reason, they know the problem and the solution without having really engaged the men and women who are out there working every day to educate. That's number one. The biggest challenge we have is the funding formula, QBE funding formula. And the formula is weighted, i.e., it's primarily about enrollment. You get so much money based on the number of students enrolled. We weighted for children who speak English as a second language, as we should. A school district will get more money if you have a child who speaks English as a second language enrolled. School districts are appropriated more QBE dollars if there's a child with a disability, as it should. What Georgia doesn't do, and one of only 6 states in America that refuses to do this, is that we do not wait for poverty. And any educator will tell you that oftentimes, more times than not, children who come from impoverished backgrounds have more barriers to overcome in terms of getting access to and succeeding in our education. We have to help our school districts be more successful, but it's almost impossible or difficult to do it if we don't provide them with appropriate funding at the state level.
Okay. I do want to ask, because we need to wrap this up, I do want to ask you how independent you will be from your party leadership. What differs you, or what can you give me an example where you might differ from your party? This is historically a Republican area. Mm-hmm. You are a Democrat. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so how would you differ from your party? Or will you be more neutral?
No, I'm a proud Democrat. But look, the people of Georgia will elect me. And in order for me to win, I'm going to have to win Democrat, Independent, and Republican. I've always done that. I've been elected 3 times statewide. And I can tell you that in those 3 elections, we had a winning coalition, and they were Republican, Democrats, Independent. They were black folk, white folk, Asian, Hispanic, North, South, East, and West, urban, rural, and suburban. I'm focused on a winning coalition and serving Georgians. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that, yes, you have to serve the people who vote for you when you win, but guess what? You also are representing the people. And we need to look at what we have in common more than what we have differently. I'm going to always do what's in the best interest.
Okay. If voters only remember one thing about your candidacy, what do you want it to be, and how do you distinguish yourself from others in this race?
I'm running primarily based on performance. Typically in a political campaign, in a political environment, you hear a lot of promises. And not that people aren't well-meaning, but it's dominated by what I will do. What I'm asking voters is to judge me by what I've already done. I've taken on some of the toughest jobs Georgia has to offer. And in every situation, I've worked hard. I wasn't always perfect. We didn't solve all the issues, but I always gave it my best. And whatever department it was, whether it was DFACS, the labor department, school district, county government, I left the agency better than. And that's what I'm asking Georgians to judge me on. And I know that they will, because they've done it before. And have performance and a vision for the future going to bring Georgia together. Look, we can't solve any of these problems totally divided. Hyper partisan politics has been a detriment to our state. Politics is always partisan, but hyper partisanship put party before people. I'll never do. And we got to build a coalition of Georgians who want to create and build a Georgia that can be from the Georgia.
Michael Thurmond, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you. It's been a joy. Thank you.
You're listening to Now We're Talking here on NowGeorgia.com.